Hello, this is a second Saturday, a workshop on open source and free software for production. Real briefly, a quick history of open source software. What the heck even is open source software? And this is all taken right off of Wikipedia, by the way. In the 50s and 60s, almost all software was produced by academic and corporate researchers working in collaboration, often shared as public domain software. In the 70s, AT&T distributed early versions of Unix, which is an operating system. It's a bit like... Oh, hey, yeah. You may remember from the movie Jurassic Park, where at the end, the young lady notices the computer is Unix, and she says, "This is Unix, I know this." So at some point, software became more of a business than a academic practice. And at that point, more philosophical kind of thoughts had to kind of come to the forefront of, like, what do we want the software environment to look like? What do we want a computer landscape to be for an individual versus for a large corporation, which might just be doing tax software or something like that? How can a end user, how can a real life human being use this stuff? In 1985, a gentleman named Richard Stallman started the GNU project, which stands for GNU's not Unix. So the GNU General Public License is a widely used license. A lot of software that is more commercial that you'd have to pay hundreds of dollars for, like, say, Photoshop. Or even services that we use, like Netflix, utilize a lot of the pieces of open source software that have been developed, and they use it under this license, the General Public License. And then here we are. What the heck is Unix? Uniplexed Information Computing System. I had no idea. But it's kind of interesting to note the Apple Macintosh, since Mac OS X, the one with the big X, is actually based on Unix. This is a Unix certified workstation right in front of me, right here. The iPhone is also based on Unix. And the reason why is because it's very stable and it's very, very shapeable. So moving on from Unix to Minix and Linus Torvalds. Who's Linus Torvalds? He's the guy that made Linux. Linux. An interesting factoid that I learned while researching this is that why it's called Linux and not Freaks, as he wanted to call it, is because someone he was working with, in the shared directory that they had, one of his folders was called LINUX. Like, this is Linus's UX folder. And his friend was like, well, that sounds better than Freaks. Let's just call it Linux. Let's see, this is Linus Torvalds. You can look him up. He's only controversial in that he flips off the camera when people talk about companies he doesn't like. So by those standards, he's a bit of a rapscallion. But he has lots of interesting things to say on the subject. He's a genuinely funny individual. And he just doesn't like companies that keep too many corporate secrets that don't benefit the end user or humanity. So he likes to flip them the finger. Yeah. You might wonder, where have you seen Linux if you've never actually purposefully encountered it? One place you may have seen it is on the computer out front.
No bones install, or did you do a VM?
Oh, it's on there. Yeah,
Okay.
It's really on there. Yep. I used Pop OS, which is just made plug-and-play installation super duper easy. So where else have we all seen Linux? The Android phone. Android phones are based on Linux. You can actually hack them pretty hard if you want to, and really see the Linux that is underneath there. So, just as every Mac and iPhone are built on Unix, every Android phone is built on Linux. All right, so that is a brief history of open source software. Really brief, because there's a lot more than that. So let's focus on software that can help us with our creative pursuits, or video making, or 3D graphics, or animation, or making logos, or anything like that. So the first two I want to show you are called Krita and OpenToons. So Krita, it really looks a bit like Photoshop if you're familiar with that kind of interface. You can make a new document that just follows the same guidelines of dimensions that you'd want to have. You have all the tools on the left side that you would normally associate with any graphics software. A fun thing about open source software is that they can be a bit esoteric in how they operate, which means that it's kind of, if you're interested in computers, or you like that feeling of back in the first time that you ever touched a PC and it was this new mysterious thing that you kind of had to learn and figure out, these really kind of lean into that aesthetic because they don't have the same level of documentation as like an Adobe product. They don't have the same level of support even, but yet here they are fully existing, completely capable of making full-fledged artwork for anything that you can think of, and publishing it and using it in a video or anything like that. All right, and moving on to the next one, OpenTunes is a really interesting piece of software. OpenTunes is actually made from a program called Tunes, which was made for Studio Ghibli, which you may be familiar with. They're a Japanese animation studio. They famously have made many films that Disney has distributed in the States, like Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke, Ponyo, lots and lots of films. So this software was actually made for them, that studio, so they could take their hand-drawn artwork and digitize it. Let's say you wanted to do a segment on, I'm going to use your show as an example, Darlene, on your show, the In the Know Women's show, that had a little animated segment. So you could hand draw your characters, you know, just fun little characters, color them in, make them look as good as you can, and then take a photo or scan them, have them in this program, and actually manipulate them like they're puppets. So instead of drawing a bunch of drawings that are detailed over and over again, you draw one that's detailed and you just manipulate it. Yeah, like you give it a skeleton and you just move the bones around. Our next three programs, 3D and video editing. So Blender is 3D and 2D software, but it's really focused on the 3D element. Godot, or Godot, even the developers do not enforce how you say it. But it is 3D and 2D game development. Some of you may be familiar with, say, television shows like The Mandalorian, where they use extensive 3D backgrounds to like represent different alien planets and that kind of thing. So those backgrounds are actually created in a program called Unreal Engine 5, which is a game development engine. Godot is a free open source game development engine. It's not as powerful as Unreal 5, but it is as powerful as Unreal 3, to make a kind of scale comparison there. And importantly for the independent developer, it is completely free with no license fees. So if you make a game on there and you sell a million copies for $1 each, no one is going to ask you for $1 more for using that software. Kdenlive is video editing software that, as you know, maybe 5 years ago, was so buggy and so unusable that it was more of an experiment. And in the past 2 or 3 years, they actually got a massive injection of money so that they could actually focus on a whole sheet of problems to fix. And now it's like pretty good. If you're used to video editing from, say, Final Cut 5 or Final Cut Studio, and that's just the interface that you're more used to, this is kind of copying that in a lot of ways. Okay, will it let me do it? Hey, it did. So I actually just dragged and dropped that video right on the timeline. You can see the interface is fairly standard. I have my audio tracks, I have my video tracks, I have an effects palette of different things I can do. And if you're familiar with the KDE desktop, it's the same foundation that makes all of the KDE stuff. So Blender is the program that I use the most personally out of this bunch, both just for personal fun and for some work stuff here. It's a fully fledged 3D graphics program. Back maybe 20-ish years ago, so I looked up like free 3D software, and this is when the internet was like brand new. So this is just how people operated, free, and then you typed in what you were looking for. And this and a few other things came up, and the first version of this that I ever looked at was literally every thing the program could do was on a button on the bottom half of the screen. And it looked, it looked like that. And all this space was just buttons, unorganized buttons. It was incredible. I loved it. I spent hours and hours, days on end, just learning the program. Then I put it away for 15 years. So a fun thing that I like to do is I'm always thinking about like little simulations, like, what would it be like if there was a cone, and then above that cone was a cube, and that cube had a lot of subdivisions in it to make it kind of a more detailed object. And then what if that cube was made out of rubber and it landed on that cone? What would happen? Here, let's see. Might do that. Okay. I don't know how exactingly real that is, but it's kind of neat. Interesting.
Does that have a name, that movement and that result in this software?
Yeah, actually, the generic name you would call this is a rigid body world simulation.
Freaky.
Yeah, you could spend hours and hours just doing that. Or, there's more productive things to do in there. I'll show you briefly a section of a music video here. There we go. So I made this music video. Filmed in this room, the live action footage, which is the gentleman on the television set. But literally every other piece of this is made in Blender. The dancing characters are all made in Blender, but they are motion tracked of him. This is my friend Arrington. His band is called Old Time Religion. He did some dances in here, and I used some online AI motion tracking software to get the relevant data to apply to these models. Here, I'll fast forward to the end because there's a bit more of the characters back here. Turns into kind of a dance party. But all that hair simulation, flopping around like that, that's all Blender. I mean, every single element of this is Blender. Even the video on that TV is rendered inside of Blender. So Blender is really powerful. It is a full compositing 3D, 2D video editing environment. It excels at the 3D and 2D and the compositing. The video editing, I would use anything else other than Blender to do video editing, but it is built in there, so you could if you really, really wanted to. Blender, I would say, if I had to guess, is probably the most beloved software on the internet. Like, if you go on YouTube and look up Blender, you will not find videos of people and their blender at home making smoothies. You'll find a million videos of people talking about Blender, doing tutorials on Blender, conferences from Blender themselves, where thousands of people attend and they do a whole TED Talk style demonstrations and all that fun stuff. Most of the time when people see 3D artwork, it's a bit of a mystery. Like, how is that even produced? How do you get that glowy kind of beautiful look out of it? Well, I'll tell you what, why don't we add some materials onto our objects so they're not just generic blank gray blobs, but instead this one can be a big shiny metal blob that is, I don't know, magenta pinkish colored, very shiny. Its metallic value way up, its shiny value way up. All right, so here we have a virtual studio. This is actually what's called an HDRI photograph, high dynamic range photo. I don't know what the I stands for. But the important thing is that it's a 360 photo that captures light value. And what that does for a 3D world like this is it allows you to have things lit as if they were in the real world being lit. If we had an HDRI photo of this studio right now, the way these lights are right now would influence the 3D objects in the scene. You can even see the metallic cube is now reflecting bits of the world around it. That's how shiny it is. All right, I'm going to show you something really freaky here. So this you may automatically recognize as kind of a human-esque figure. And based on the file name, you can probably tell what this is going to be. Oh, it's a me. So this is a 3D scan of myself taken in this room with some basic 3-point lighting just to kind of have some fun with practice lighting in a virtual environment. And I believe I can...
Which of you are real? The one sitting here with us or there on the screen?
I'll let you be the judge. You can decide, darling. So yeah, you can do like virtual lighting setups to kind of test out different little things. If you wanted to have a more monstrous lighting and see what that kind of looked like, that's a bit more representative of that. You can do fun things like put that cloth simulation on a more humanoid-looking, in fact, I think I already did that, a humanoid-looking, oh yeah, there I am, inflating. It can be me floating away by my inflated ego.
And you're big enough to admit it.
Wow, look at that go. I forgot how cool this actually looked.
Yeah, I like.
Anyways, quite a bit you can do with Blender. Including the bizarre and surreal, just for fun, you know? Well, I think that about wraps up our presentation of open source software here. It's 11:58, so I think we're right on the dot. Goodbye, thanks for coming.